familiar faces in the room as well, so lovely to see all of you guys too. And before I start, I just wanted to introduce you guys to Alex, who's doing some recording for us today, and Bryony as well. So those are the strange faces at the back. So my name is Will Harlow. I'll tell you a bit more about myself in a minute. And first, I just want to tell you what we're going to be talking about today. So the title of my talk today is How to Beat Arthritis and Stay Independent, Mobile and Pain-Free in Your 50s and Beyond. So it's quite an ambitious talk. I've only got 45 minutes, so I'm going to do my best. So why am I giving this talk? Well, the reason I'm giving this talk is because I am a physio, and a lot of the people I see at my clinic, they do have arthritis, they're not independent, they're not mobile, and they do have pain. So my job really is to help people to overcome those challenges, okay? So who am I? As I said, my name's Will. I'm a chartered physio and a clinic owner. I've got a clinic in Farnham called HT Physio, which you're all welcome to come to one day. And I'm a specialist really in helping people over 50. So I set up the clinic to help people age 50 plus to regain mobility and get back to doing the things they love. I'm a published author. I wrote a book which I published in 2020 called Thriving Beyond 50. I've got some copies here for anyone who might want one later. We have hit 2 best-selling categories in Amazon. We've sold almost 10,000 copies of the book, so it's been fantastic. So it's been quite popular. And we now have a YouTube channel as well with over 200,000 subscribers, and that's people from all over the world, and basically they just like to watch me waffle on about stuff and hopefully solve some painful problems. So the first part of the talk, I thought it was really important to cover why do over 50s lose mobility? And in my mind and from my experience, there's 4 really common reasons. So I'm going to tell you about the 4 reasons, and then we're going to put in some plans and a strategy to help you to fix it. So the first common reason people lose mobility is basically poor general health. So this is problems like illness and disease. Some of them are lifestyle related, some of them are due to things that people can't help, such as cancer, and also obesity as well. So people who are obese do have a higher risk of losing their mobility. The second common reason is injury. So injury is different to illness. In the injury, I think of as something more physical, so it's to do with the musculoskeletal system. So if someone's fallen over and they've broken their wrist or they've broken their hip, that's an injury, but also overuse injuries too. So like arthritis and working on a muscle and getting a tendon problem, we would count that as an injury too. The third category is wear and tear. So these are problems that develop over time. So this is like the cartilage wearing away in your joints. And I think this is a big problem because of poor public health knowledge. There isn't that much good information out there about what to do when you've got arthritis or what to do when you feel a joint gets stiff. It's like, do you rest it? Do you exercise it? You go to your GP and they say, well, what do you expect? It's just your age. Take these painkillers. Has anyone heard that before, by the way? Yeah, I thought so. I hear all the time in the clinic, so we wanted to take a different approach with what I do. And then the fourth reason people lose their mobility, and this is a really common one, is a loss of confidence. And loss of confidence can happen to people after they've fallen. So if someone falls, then they fear falling again because of how traumatic it is. We tend to lose our balance as well as we get a bit older and get changes to the inner ear and things, and that can lead to people losing their confidence too. We can tend to lose strength as well, and all of these things can add up to just not feeling as confident as you did. And it's a huge reason why my clients sometimes feel that they're not as happy leaving the house. Maybe they're not happy in the garden, just because they're worried about what might happen if they lose their balance and fall. So that's all the doom and gloom. So that's why people tend to lose their mobility. But the good news is today's talk is all about giving you some tips to help you from preventing all 4 of these things from happening. But before I give you my tips, I wanted to tell you about the 5 pillars of physical health that I've sort of discovered during my last 10 years working as a physio. So my goal really is to tell you about these 5 pillars and then help you to build a plan in your own life to make sure that they're prevalent in your life. So the 5 pillars are basically 5 attributes that all of us need to have to stay healthy. So the first one is strength. So if you're not strong, if you don't have strength in your muscles, you're at a much higher risk of injury or illness than someone who is strong. So strength really is your ability to pull or push or lift or move your body through space. Okay, so that's really important. And we're going to talk about some of the most important areas to be strong later in the talk. The second pillar is mobility. So mobility, in my mind, is how well you can move your joints and how much control you have over that movement. So for example, if I can move my elbow like this, but that's all I've got, then I would say that's poor elbow mobility because you haven't got a very good range of motion. The third thing is flexibility. So you might have good mobility, but if everything feels really tight in your muscles, then that's not very good, and that can lead to injuries as well. The fourth thing, as we've discussed, is balance. So if you're not very well balanced, then you're not going to be confident walking. You might wobble and you might fall. And then the fifth thing is your general health. So we need to avoid problems like diabetes, obesity, heart issues, and other things too. So my first tip to you guys really is for anyone who wants to stay healthy, the goal really is to build a weekly program around a plan to prevent any of those things from going wrong. So an example plan I might give to someone who comes into my clinic is to walk on a Monday, so go for a long walk on a Monday, and that would tick off your balance and some of your general health, because obviously walking burns calories and gets the heart and the lungs moving. On a Tuesday, you might go to the gym, you might lift some weights, you might do an exercise class. You might laugh, but I've got a lot of my clients do go to the gym, they do join exercise classes, and they might dread it when they start, but when they get going, they really like it. On the Wednesday, you might practice balance. You might stand on one leg. You might do that whenever you brush your teeth. That's a good way to build that. This same person might then go to a yoga or a Pilates class each week. That works on your flexibility and your mobility. And then you might have a particular stretch that you do every day just to keep the tight areas that you feel get tight under control. So it doesn't have to be arduous. This is the main thing. You don't have to dedicate 2-3 hours a day to exercise. It should be easy. You should be able to build it around your daily routine and your current schedule without having to commit too much time. So that's kind of the first tip I had for you really, but I've got 10 other tips that are a bit more specific. Really, I wanted to give you the 10 things that I think are sort of the most valuable for people in kind of the 50+ age group to keep them well. So the first tip, and this is something that not many people know about, and I think as a physio it's something that can seem quite obvious to me but not to others, is if you have a stiff joint, so if you have a stiff hip or a stiff knee, you should very gently try to regain the movement you've lost. Okay? So I think what some people find is that when they're stiff and they go to their doctor and their doctor says, well, stiffness is normal. They say, well, okay, if it's normal, maybe I should just accept it and not move that joint. Then what happens is the stiffness gets worse. So it becomes stiffer and stiffer and stiffer over time. They lose even more movement, and then that leads to knock-on problems. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but if you've had a niggle in your knee, if you leave it alone for ages, the next thing that happens is your hip starts to hurt, and then maybe your lower back after that, and before you know it, you've got the whole side of your body in pain. And that is because that initial stiffness wasn't treated properly. So stiffness in one area of the body will lead to stress and strain in other areas, and that's pretty much always the case. So in my clinic, I will never just look at one joint. So if someone comes in with a bad knee, we would always look at their ankle and their hip and their lower back as well. And hopefully my patients who've come in so far can agree that that's what we do. So when we're trying to regain movement of the joint, the key thing here is it shouldn't be painful. So I'm not asking you to keep doing squats if you've got a bad knee. I'm not asking you to force it to bend. What we're doing is we're gently trying to encourage it. Okay, so really it's about giving it kind of a gentle push, a bit of a nudge to loosen up by 1 degree every couple of days. That's what we aim for. So let's say I've got a stiff elbow and I can only move it to here. what I would try and do with someone is I would get them to just take it to that stiff point and then come away from it. Then take it back and away, and take it back and away. It's very boring and repetitive, but it works. Because over time, you'll get 1 degree, 2 degrees more, 3 degrees more, and then eventually, over a course of a couple of weeks, you might find that that joint moves normally again. Okay, so this is probably one of the most important things for the people I see. It should improve slowly over time. We don't get big jumps. It just happens bit by bit. So that's the first tip. Is that kind of thing helpful to you guys, first of all? Is that useful? Good. So the second tip I wanted to talk about is the 2 most important leg muscle groups. And you've probably found people telling you in the past, oh, you need to have nice, strong legs. And that's all good and well. But what areas do you work on? And how would you work on them? And we've got lots of muscles in our legs, so which ones are the most important? Well, by far, there are 2 areas in the legs that I think are the most important for general health and for preventing injury. And those 2 muscle groups are, number 1, the quads, so your thigh muscles, and number 2, the glutes, so the buttock muscles. And these muscle groups are vital for lots of different reasons. So I'll go through a couple of the reasons now which you might resonate with. So if you don't have strong quads, you've got no protection for your knee. So a huge reason for people having knee pain is the fact they've got no protection around that knee joint. So all of the stress and the strain of moving around and walking and climbing stairs, and going up and down hills, it's all going through the knee joint, not through the muscles. So if you have strong quads at the front of the leg, it's going to prevent a heck of a lot of pain in your knee. Now, if we move up to the glutes here, now these are important for protecting your hip, so the muscles around a joint tend to protect it, but your glutes also protect your knee because they are responsible for the alignment of your leg. Okay, so if you've got weak glutes, what happens is the leg falls in and it puts a lot of stress on the inside of the knee. So does anyone here have pain on the inside of their knee? We've got one. Anyone else? Anyone owning up? I've had pain on the inside of my knee before. It's really unpleasant. And I found that it improved really quickly when I started working my glutes and getting them stronger. So it's a big thing. And does anyone have lower back pain, or has anyone experienced lower back pain in the past? That's more common. And the glutes are actually a big cause of lower back pain, or lack of glute strength is a big cause of lower back pain. Because when we bend, what should happen really is 50% of the work is done by our back and 50% is done by the glutes, the muscles in the hip. But if we haven't got strong glutes, what do you think the back has to do? Yeah, it has to work extra hard, and it's doing a job suddenly it wasn't designed to do. It's doing double the work it was supposed to. So that leads to stress, it leads to tension, and before long the back is getting really tight. And I get a lot of people coming in to see me who say, I'm terrified I've got something really badly wrong with my back. It's been painful for 6 months. It's not getting better no matter what I do. And I look at their back and I can confidently say to them, there's actually not much wrong with your back, but there is a big problem down here. There's no strength. So this back has had to do 2 or 3 times the work it was designed to do because it's got no assistance from this guy down here. So really, really important muscle group. So if I had to be pinned down on the 2 most important, it would be those 2. And I'll show you my favorite exercise now to strengthen them, and it works both of them at the same time. Don't worry, I'm not going to get you standing up doing it. I can demonstrate. So my patients will certainly recognize this one because this is a big proponent of mine. It's called the slow sit to stand, or the slow stand to sit. So how many people have noticed themselves flopping into a chair? Yeah, me too when I'm lazy. But it's not good, okay, because it doesn't give you any work in these important muscle groups. So we can actually get them stronger by practicing very slowly lowering ourselves down into a chair without using our hands. So in practice, this exercise looks something like this. You stand with your feet at a comfortable width, and then you're just going to put your hands out the way so you're not tempted to use them. And then you very slowly put your bottom down. See if I can do it constantly all the way down. And the goal is to land like a feather, so you don't make a sound, okay? Now, the good news is you don't have to do loads of those because it's quite a tough exercise. So just doing 2 or 3 in a row is enough to start to get these muscles working. And it works both these and these, gives you great bang for your buck. So that's a great exercise that pretty much anyone can do, and it's super relevant for just daily life. So the third tip I've got for you, and this is another thing to do with the legs, really, really important, is to stretch your calves. Okay? Now the calves are these muscles down here. So the calf is not really one muscle, it's got a few muscles inside it. But what we find is that over time, people can develop tightness in their calves. It tends to be worse in people over 50, and it can cause a whole host of problems. And the insidious thing about tight calves is that people don't tend to know they've got them until a problem comes about. Has anyone here had plantar fasciitis? Has anyone here had a problem with their Achilles? No, all good. Has anyone here had pain from an arthritic knee? So all of these things can be triggered and made worse by tight calves. So they're a huge problem for people, and I've never found it online spoken about. It's really bizarre. So not many people know about this, but it's an area I treat with my clients all the time, and it brings about a really good improvement for many people. So the question really is, how do you know you've got tight calves? Because you can test this. There's a couple of signs. The first sign is if you're sitting and you pull your leg up in front of you, can you get more than a 90-degree angle here? So if you can only get your foot to flat, to there, that means you've probably got tight calves. Okay, so you want more than a 90-degree angle. The second test is you find a wall. So you can imagine the wall's here. You stand with your leg close to the wall, and the challenge is, can you bend your knee and touch the wall without your heel popping up? Okay? So many people can't do that. They get to here, and no matter what they do, they have to lift their heel to touch. So these are a couple of tests you can do at home to test your calves. Okay? Now, if your calves are tight, as I said, you're at a really big risk of problems in your foot, problems in your ankle. And the reason it can also cause knee problems is because the calf doesn't stop here, it actually stops above the knee. So if your calf gets tight, it compresses everything in the middle of it, so between the heel and here, including your knee joint. So if you have a meniscus tear, if you have knee arthritis, if you have a ligament problem in your knee, the pain will be made worse if your calf is tight. So you're not going to get this kind of information from your GP because they don't know about it. So if you have tight calves, you can stretch them really easily. And my favorite stretch is to put one leg behind the other, bend the front knee, keep that heel on the floor. You'll feel a stretch there. It's a nice stretch, really good for tight calves, and should relieve it. So because it's quite boring and you've got to hold that stretch for 30 seconds for it to be any good, I tell people to time it with things when they're brushing their teeth or when they're waiting for the kettle to boil, times when you're up and about on your feet anyway. So hopefully that was useful as well. Right, my fourth tip for you guys is to maintain a healthy spine. And that's a very general piece of advice, but there's a few ways we can do that. Because as we learned earlier today when I asked you about lower back pain is really, really common. We've got an epidemic of it. NICE, which are the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, they reckon that at least 80% of people will have an episode of back pain at some point in their lives. For many people, these episodes can go on for months and months and months. And more often than not, if you have back pain, if you were to get an X-ray or a scan, it wouldn't show anything. So back pain is often caused by what we call mechanical problems. So it means there's no clear injury, nothing's damaged, nothing's worn away. It's just stress and strain on the spine. So maintaining a healthy spine is vital. And despite what you might have read online, your spine is made to bend and to twist. It's designed to do those things. So the biggest thing I try and encourage my clients is to not be scared of moving. So I get people who come in who have back pain who are scared to bend, probably because they've had pain in the past or they've got pain right now. And we have to basically encourage them to move because it's safe. And that sends a nice signal to the spine to loosen up further. Now, to keep our spines safe and to keep them mobile, we need to take them through a nice, comfortable range of motion. So you've got 6 movements of your spine. You've got forward bending, you've got backward bending, you've got side to sides, left and right, and you've got turning, left and right. Now, keeping your spine healthy could be as simple as just doing a couple of repetitions of each of those movements every couple of days. If you've already got a pretty good spine, that is often all it takes. If you've got stiff areas, you might notice that one of those movements doesn't feel great, it feels tight, feels stiff, maybe it doesn't go very far, you get to here and you think, I can't go any further, then those are the movements you should work on more frequently. And over a number of weeks, for most people, it's possible to get those movements back and to get moving. Now, why am I asking you to do this? Well, one thing is it stops people from getting back pain, but the other thing it does, it's actually been proven to slow down arthritis in the spine and even reverse it. So people who have arthritic symptoms can often relieve those symptoms by carrying on moving the spine and getting it mobile again. So it's amazing how many problems movement can fix, and quite often it's things that people just say, well, I'm going to have to accept this now because this is the way it is. Actually, keep it moving and often the pain goes away and the movement comes back. So hopefully that's been useful as well. The fifth tip I've got for you is to keep a strong core. Has anyone ever been to a Pilates class? Yes. Okay. What kind of stuff do you work on in Pilates? It's core stuff, isn't it? A lot of it is core, and Pilates is super common, super popular, I should say, and for good reason, because Joseph Pilates basically came up with a plan to keep the core strong and to use the glutes and to get the back moving in the right way. And it wasn't just Pilates. We've had lots of people who've focused on the core within our profession. And the reason we do this is because your core is basically your corset, okay? It keeps everything in the middle stable. So people often think of just these bits of the abs as being the core, but in reality, the core wraps all the way around. It's like a sheet of muscles that goes from the front of your navel here all the way around to your spine. And it keeps you stable when you bend and when you twist. Now, if you have a weak core, what happens is as you start to move outside of your base of support, there's nothing protecting you, which means that the back is exposed, okay? Not only is the back exposed, but you won't have very good balance. And because this is your middle point, you won't be able to use your legs or your arms with as much effect either. So your core really is like an anchor. It's your middle point. It's the area that should be one of the strongest parts of your body. Now, how can you keep a strong core? Well, one obvious thing to do is to join a Pilates class, because they do work. But you don't need to go to a class if that's not your thing. There's a couple of really good exercises. I've got some in my book, but I also have some on my YouTube channel as well, which you can find. They involve lying down, so I'll spare you the sight of me getting up and down from the floor. But there's lots of different exercises you can do. The key is to start off gentle and just get it switching on. Okay, and to feel what a core switching on feels like. Once you've got it, you can start to build on that movement and build a proper exercise program that works for you. So my sixth tip for you, and this is a huge one, is to practice your balance every day. Now, has anyone here actually had a fall in the last couple of years? So just over a couple. So if we look around at the number of hands, there's at least 5, 6, 7 out of you guys. Does anyone?
Ladies who are not here because they've had falls as well.
There we are. So falls are common, and falls are a massive problem. Does anyone know how much per year falls cost the NHS? Does anyone want to hazard a guess? We're some way off. It's £5 billion a year. 5 billion. And this is the immediate impact of falls, plus all of the aftercare, plus all of the disability. There's a scary stat. If you fall and you fracture your hip, 30% of the people who fall and fracture their hip will die within 2 years. Which is terrifying. But I know that's a really nasty stat, but it's important to know. Okay? And a big cause of falls, to my point, is loss of balance. okay? And that's why one of the core things I work on my clients is balance. We get them balancing better because preventing a fall is vital. So why do we lose our balance? Because it definitely is something that affects over 50s. Well, as we get older, we do tend to lose muscle mass, so strength comes down, okay? We get changes to our inner ear as well. So the ear doesn't function quite as well, and your inner ear is your balance center. So if your inner ear is not working so well, then your balance is not as good. We also get changes to eyesight, okay? So eyesight is a huge contributor to proper balance. If you can see, then that gives you an extra 30 to 50% balance capability, and if you can't, then you lose that like that. We also lose joint mobility, so people who are stiff are more likely to fall. So if you can only move your knee in a half range of motion, you can't adjust if you were to wobble, which means you're more likely to go down as well. And this combination makes falls really likely in people over 50. Now the good news is, after all that misery, we can counteract this loss of balance, but it takes practice. Okay, it takes practice. And if you think about balance practice, the first thing you might be thinking about is, well, standing on one leg. And that is a good way to practice your balance, but that's out of the question for a lot of people, especially the people I work with who have had a fall. They're already scared, they're weak in their legs, and they don't have great mobility. They don't have the confidence to stand on one leg. So there's other ways we can practice balance. So I'll show you a couple of easy ways if standing on one leg is difficult. One way is to just put your feet together. Okay, so when you stand like this with your feet together, you've narrowed your base of support, and immediately you're challenging your balance centers. Okay, now this might be very easy to you. Well, if that's easy, I challenge you to do it with your eyes shut, like this, which is really tricky, okay, because you lose that 30 to 50% from your eyesight, so that will start you wobbling off. And basically what we want when we're practicing balance is we want you to be a little bit wobbly, because that means we're challenging the balance centers. So if you're practicing your balance like this and nothing's happening, it's not going to get better. It has to be challenging. So my tip for people who are going to practice is to have something really close that you can hold on to in case you do wobble. The other thing you can do is you can put yourself in a corner of two walls. Okay? So then you've got a wall either side of your shoulder. So if you do go to the left, you'll hit that wall. If you go to the right, you'll hit that wall. So practicing it every day is really important. And it doesn't take long. Probably 2 to 5 minutes per day is enough to see an improvement over a number of weeks. But the issue with practicing balance is it does take time to get it better. So we wouldn't see big changes in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We're talking months really, but the payoff is worth it. If you can avoid falling because you've practiced your balance, it's worth every minute of practice. So that's what I have to say on balance. My seventh tip, and this is a common, popular one, is aim for 10,000 steps of walking a day. And I always laugh at 10,000 steps. It's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek number, really, because there's no magic about 10,000 steps. Does anyone know where it actually came from, the 10,000 steps thing? Yeah, that's right. It came from a researcher in Japan, and he noticed that in the 60s, the Japanese were adopting some of the Western ways of life, and he looked around and he noticed that people were getting fatter. And he thought, this is no good. We need to drill into the public a clear message that's going to help people lose weight again. So what he said was there's research that shows 10,000 steps is the key, and he gave people a very early version of a pedometer, which is like a step counter. So it looks like one of these things. You attach it to your trousers and it counts your steps. I remember using these at university sort of 10, 15 years ago. Luckily we've got them in our phones now. Has anyone found yours in your iPhone? Yeah. So that's really useful. But even though there's no magic to 10,000 steps, there is research to show that anything above about 7,500 steps is ideal. So if you can aim for 7,500 to 12,500 steps each day, that equates to about 3 to 5 miles of walking. And it's a brilliant target to aim for. One of the reasons it's so good is because it keeps your bones strong. So walking, it encourages better bone density. It keeps your calorie burn high, so you're less likely to put on sort of bad weight, if you like. It staves off lots of health problems, keeps your cardiovascular system strong and healthy. And it's great for balance, and it's great for general mobility as well. So if you aim for 10,000 steps, you can't go too far wrong. Now, my 8th tip for you guys, and this is one that's kind of a little bit outside of my world. It's more into the medical side of things, but it's to keep your vitamin D levels topped up. Has anyone heard of vitamin D and what it does? And yeah, so the government's had a big push on vitamin D in the last few years for a number of reasons. And vitamin D is something that our skin creates from sunlight. So as the sunlight comes down, it reacts with some cells inside the skin, and then that turns into vitamin D. And vitamin D is vital for the health of your muscles and your nerves and your bones. And it's also vital for your general health as well. Now, the problem with vitamin D as we get older is our skin becomes less effective at turning the sunlight into vitamin D as we age, okay? So you might have noticed as you go through your life that your skin feels a bit thinner. Maybe you see some wrinkles. All of these things point to the fact that it might not be as good at processing vitamin D, okay? So even if you're spending just as long in the sun as you once were, you're probably not getting the same vitamin D as you were when you were in your teens and your 20s. Now, vitamin D is actually the first supplement that the government's ever recommended. Did you know that? And it's recommended it because there is so much evidence behind the good of vitamin D. We can get it in small amounts from our diet. Things like mushrooms have vitamin D, but really most people are deficient, especially in England and in the sort of northern part of the hemisphere. So Norway and Sweden have a big problem as well. We quite frankly just don't get enough sun. So low vitamin D can cause problems like osteoporosis, but did anyone know it can also cause pain if you've got low vitamin D? If you feel aches in your bones and in your muscles and it's quite generalized, a lot of the time that's a vitamin D deficiency, one of the first signs. It can cause confusion. So if you feel like you're forgetting where you're putting things or you're sort of not with it. I get that sometimes. They tell me my vitamin D's all right, but yeah, vitamin D can cause that as well, low vitamin D. It can cause depression. Low vitamin D can cause depression and low mood. So if you feel low, it's worth getting those levels checked. It can also cause weakness, inability to use your muscles quite so well, and just a whole host of other issues. Now, it's difficult to diagnose because it's such a vague set of symptoms. So your best bet is to go to your GP and just ask for a vitamin D test. They're usually, touch wood, happy to do it because it's such a big problem. And thankfully, low vitamin D levels can usually be remedied by a good quality supplement. So important to keep it topped up. Now, the 9th tip I've got for you is to understand the truth about posture. Now, you're not going to get a physio come up here and not mention the P word, posture, because we love talking about it. But the truth I'm going to tell you today, and this might surprise you, is there's no such thing as a bad posture. Okay? Now, hear me out. Now, if we're talking about bad posture, what people usually assume is bad posture is like this, slouching. Now, I can sit in a slouched position for a few minutes, and it's no problems. Equally, I can sit upright in a great posture for a few minutes, and no problems. But if you ask me to slouch for 3 hours, there's going to be problems. I'm going to probably have pain in my neck and my back. But equally, if you ask me to sit upright like this for 3 hours, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to have pain somewhere as well. So this means that there's no such thing as a bad posture. It's just about how much time you spend in that posture. Okay? So this is key for people who sit at a computer, who do desk work. It's not about the way you sit, and yeah, you can get your screen put at the right level, and that will help. But no matter what position you're in, try not to spend too long in it. Now, for the people I treat, people who are retired, over 50, quite often they find that they fall into a habit of just sitting in a chair for a lot of the day. And the problem with this is you're in one position, one posture for 8 hours. It's really not very good for the body. And the reason it's not good is because over that period of time, your muscles will tighten up to basically fix you in that position, which is fine when you're in the position. But then when you go to move, you've still got those tight muscles. So they're trying to pull you back to where you were. This is why people who are chronic slouchers, we get them to stand up straight. It feels horrendous for them because their muscles are trying to pull them back to this. So your only remedy for this is to keep moving and to try and change positions. I recommend every 30 to 60 minutes. So if you're watching a film, that's fine, but you might want to just slightly change the way you're sitting every 30 minutes. If you're sat at a desk, every 30 minutes set a timer, just get up, go and get a glass of water, come back down. It all sounds really boring, but it helps to prevent these things from setting in. Okay, and it's a big cause of problems if you don't. Now I have another tip for you on that topic. It's called the 20-20-20 rule, and this is for people who sit for long periods of time. And basically it means every 20 minutes, stare at an object 20 feet away from you for 20 seconds. Okay? 20-20-20. And the reason it is good is because if you're sat working on something, we tend to be very focused at something close. Sometimes our head kind of drifts towards it, especially if we're on our phone like this or we're looking at a laptop. Stop in 20 minutes time, look at something a little bit away. What that does is it brings you back up to a different posture, it rests your eyes, and it basically stops some of these problems from setting in. So try that next time you're working on emails or doing your accounts or whatever. Now I've got one more tip for you. This might actually be the most important one, and it goes back to the topic of falls. And the 10th tip is to maintain your ability to get up off the floor. Has anyone tried getting up off the floor recently? Were you surprised at how difficult it was? A lot of my clients come into me because they have a real scare because they've ended up on the floor and they can't get up. And it shocked them because they thought it would be easy. But for whatever reason, maybe they can't rely on one knee anymore because they've got a stiff knee, or maybe they weren't strong enough to lever themselves up off the floor. But for whatever reason, they couldn't get up. Now, many people get seriously hurt from falls, not because they fell, but because they couldn't get back up again. Okay? I was going to tell you a story, actually, to finish up. It's a story of my nan, who is 94 years old. She still lives alone. She still is independent, bless her. But 2 years ago, my auntie, who goes in every day, said to my nan, you're going to need one of these little buzzers because we can't come in all the time, and even though you've never fallen, we worry about you, nan. So my nan said, I don't want to wear one of those bloody things. It makes me feel like an old person. And after some cajoling, my nan agreed, okay, I'll wear it just to shut up my auntie, okay? Now, she put it on. My auntie said, much happier seeing you with that on. And she left. I'll see you tomorrow, nan. What happened 5 minutes later, do you think? She fell. She fell. She didn't take it off. She fell. She went to the kitchen to make her tea. She turned. Her foot got stuck on something and she fell. And she broke her hip and her wrist at the same time. And luckily, she had the thing on. So she pressed the thing, because otherwise she would have been down there for 24 hours, because it's a whole day before my auntie came back in. So she was able to come straight back, obviously call the ambulance, and everything was okay. But it just shows that even if we maintain the ability to balance and we do everything we can to get up off the floor, if we are injured, we need to have that backup. So a telephone on you all the time, or one of those buzzers, they do work wonders. But provided you're not injured when you fall, getting back up again is really, really important. So I've got 2 videos actually on my YouTube channel which basically walk you through step by step, first of all, how you would practice getting up off the floor if you currently can't. And the second video will show you what to do if you fall and you're stuck. So I can leave links, I can send them to Heather and you can have a look because you guys don't want to see me crawling around here for 10 minutes. So I think that's probably just about all I had to mention today. I hope that has been useful. Thank you.